as I started to prepare to teach it for the first time, telepathy and animal communication, I said, um, I think I think maybe if we get enough students, we could do some sort of scientific research around this. Maybe we could even sort of prove the existence of telepathy, which is an interesting idea. It turns out it was proven 75 years ago, and there's more than 10,000 papers supporting telepathy and remote viewing. And I just had never done the reading.
My Reset and Recondition 14-day New Year program is available now for 2024 and for only £29. You heard me right, it wasn't an error. For just £29, you will receive to your inbox every day for the first 14 days of January one thing to reset and recondition each of your mind, body, spirit, and beyond. To include a recipe, a journal prompt, an affirmation, a chakra balancing exercise, and most excitingly, as an upgrade from last year's R&R, one short, concise manifestation lesson and exercise each day that will lead you to absolutely knowing how to call in your manifestation for the year ahead by the end of the 14 days. And all you need to do is commit 15 minutes a day for the first 14 days of the year. And you can even join our Facebook group to do it alongside me and other women going through the Reset and Recondition program. Just head to laurenvakneen.co.uk/reset or head to the show notes to get the link and sign up now for just £29 and be ready in time for the new year. Welcome back to Reconditioned, everyone, with me, Lauren Vakneen. And this episode I have recorded with Derek Loudermilk, who I met through my shamanic apprenticeship with our shaman that we both work with. And we talk about some really deep stuff, so I thought it would be great to get him on the podcast to just go a bit deeper into the metaphysical. He had me on his podcast as well, and it was super fun. And the metaphysical side of things, from Derek's perspective, is him really connecting the science and the spirituality and actually showing there is no difference. Actually, it's all, you can call it all spirituality or you can call it all science. And Derek actually just calls it all science. And we talk about kind of the science behind time, the illusion of time, the science behind luck, the science behind adventure, the science behind anything, and actually how that relates from a metaphysical perspective, like how we can bend time, how we can create our own luck. Incredible conversations. So I know you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. And Derek actually invited me to contribute a chapter to the Activate Your Life series of books. He's done a series of books called Activate Your Life, and the most recent one is out this week, and I am a contributor. I've written a chapter for that book, so I'm going to put the details in the show notes, but just go to Amazon if you like and type in Activate Your Life and you will see it there, and feel free to buy a copy and not just support us but activate your life. It's basically a book of contributions from different coaches, spiritual teachers, etc., of different methods to help you truly activate your life and enhance your life and grow in different ways. So it's great for practitioners, coaches, etc., to enhance their own knowledge, and it's also just great for the everyday person wanting to grow more. So I am super excited about it, and I hope you will be too. So go ahead and purchase a copy and really just enjoy this episode, because it's deep, and it's also just really a chat between friends that goes in areas that I didn't know it was going to go in. I was just kind of here to ask him questions that I've always wanted to ask him and to expand on. And it's super interesting. This is kind of one of those episodes you sit back with a cup of tea and listen to, or maybe out on a walk out in nature. So enjoy this episode with me and Derek Loudermilk. If you've been here a while, you'll know that I believe that we should get whatever we can in the way of nutrition through food.
And where we can't get it through food, that's where we supplement. Now, in order to get myself from disabled to completely able-bodied, I had to be really specific and well-researched when it came to supplements, which is why I've been using AMRITA Nutrition for the past decade, more than decade actually, to buy pretty much 95% of the supplements I take and recommend. Now, AMRITA stock the highest quality brands using the highest quality non-synthetic ingredients. Most of these brands couldn't even be bought in the UK when I started taking them years ago, so AMRITA have made it super easy and accessible. And the other great thing about AMRITA is they offer personal support. So if you're not sure of which supplement to order, you can call them and they'll advise you. Now, they're usually a practitioner-only stockist, but you can buy supplements from AMRITA now using practitioner invite code Lauren, which will get you 10% off all supplements. And once you set up an account, that 10% will be applied to every order. I've gone ahead and created a collection of all my favorite supplements with AMRITA to help you out with it, which you can find in the show notes or on my website by typing in AMRITA. Otherwise, just visit amritanutrition.co.uk and use code Lauren for 10% off. Thank you so much to AMRITA for continuing to support our mission here at Reconditioned.
Derek Loudermilk is a former pro cyclist and extreme microbiologist turned professional adventurer, author, and lifestyle entrepreneur. He traveled the world for 7 years as a digital nomad with his family, living in 15 different countries during that time. He recently completed a quest to learn 100 different healing, metaphysical, and esoteric practices from around the world. His podcast, The Derek Loudermilk Show, which celebrates its 10th anniversary in 2023, brings people to a high-level understanding of cutting-edge topics in science, spirituality, adventure, and human potential. And if all that wasn't enough, he's also a 4-time best-selling author of Superconductors, Revolutionize Your Career and Make Big Things Happen, as well as the Activate Your Life series, of which I am a contributor for the next book. So Derek, welcome.
Lauren, good to be with you.
So good to have you here. Let's start with what have you done so far today to support your wellness?
Yeah, I went outside with my kids at sunrise and we stood on the grass in bare feet, but it was just above freezing. And so it was at some point, I don't know if we'll be doing the barefoot grounding at sunrise, but that's become so we all drink our water, we all go out, stand barefoot, and sort of get some light in our eyes at the beginning of the day. And the kids are on board with that. But it's also a nice opportunity to just catch the mood of the environment, the birds and the squirrels and like the humans, what they're doing. I live in the city, but next to a park. So we kind of have this dual ecosystem here. And it's nice just to kind of tune in with that in the morning.
I would say that that's like one of the healthiest things you could do to start your day. Connecting with the earth, grounding on the electromagnetic frequency of Mother Earth, looking at the early morning light, getting that vitamin D. Beautiful.
It's nice. It's nice. And then we, go back to the craziness of give me my breakfast and all that stuff.
Yeah, standard. But you know what? I would say even if they go inside and behave in the same way that they always do, you've done something.
Yep.
And you're in Missouri, right?
St. Louis, Missouri. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. So I didn't realize that it would get that cold there. I mean, shows how much I know about Missouri, but
because we're, it's a big continent, the center just gets cold. We don't have any water effects really. So even all the way down to the south, you can get freezing temperatures in, November to March.
Yeah. It was like here this morning. It was the first day. It's November for anyone listening. It was the first day that it felt really super cold, like when it hurts to breathe,
I did used to live in Montana, and that's the coldest I've experienced was negative 45 degrees. And there's when you go out and you breathe in through your nose and it immediately freezes everything in your nose and sinuses. It kind of like crinkles, kind of crinkles, and it's hilarious because it's so ridiculously cold. And I never really minded the cold there because it's sunny all the time. And here in St. Louis, you get cloudy and cold all winter, and it's a bit different. So people try to escape
Yeah,
more.
I'm exactly the same. So we have a lot of grey skies in London, as I'm sure you know. But today was this most amazing, bright, cold autumnal day. And I went for a really long walk in the woods, and it was just magnificent. And that's my favorite kind of, I mean, I'm a summer. I love the summer. But, you know, if it's going to be cold, as long as it's sunny, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, so you have
It's the grey
woods
skies. Yeah, we've got woods.
near
We
enough to
live
you.
kind of right opposite the woods. So it
Mm,
was one of our when we bought this house, we were like, yep, it's right opposite the woods.
nice. Excellent.
So just to kind of give everyone a bit of a background, you and I know each other because we work with the same shaman, and so we connected through that. And that's some wild ride that we're on. And maybe we'll delve into a little bit of that as much as we're allowed to. But to start, what you do is so interesting and so broad. And I would love us to just start with you explaining in your own words what you do and what you're passionate about.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of different things. Obviously, you mentioned some in my bio, but the recurring theme that runs through everything is adventure and freedom, really, and expressed in different ways, exploring the world through science or through living abroad or lately consciousness. And so, you know, what I do for a living is I try to find ways to get the things that I'm interested in and teach them in a useful way to other people, whether it's teaching business or telepathy and remote viewing, or, you know, who knows what the next program is going to be. But I do kind of learning out loud where I'll go and I'll learn, you know, and this kind of started with the podcast. It's 10 years old now. One of my first businesses was I was podcasting. A lot of people wanted to start podcasts. So I think we launched 64 podcasts in a year in 2015 in Bali. And we would just have these like hangout sessions in my living room in my villa in Bali. And just like every month we'd launch a new round of new people starting their podcasts. And obviously podcasters often have other businesses. And so then it was like, well, can you help me with, I want to put on a retreat, or I'm doing coaching and so I would test them out. You know, a lot of podcasters want to write a book. So I was like, maybe I should write a book. So I learned the publishing process. So a lot of times I'll go through something, try to find a good system to teach it, and then turn around and teach it.
Mm-hmm. So were you always really entrepreneurial?
The 4-hour work week got me both interested in the digital nomad concept, and I read it when it came out in 07, and thought about it until 2013 when I moved abroad. And the first place we went was Vietnam. And so while I was in grad school, I started my first couple of businesses in grad school. And I was in grad school for microbiology. I was studying the beginnings of life in Yellowstone National Park. That's why I put extreme microbiology, because I was studying the boiling acid hot springs there in Yellowstone. And but I was really interested in both sociology, like studying how business is done on an interpersonal level, and also just how innovators, you know, find a market niche to serve and come up with solutions. So I actually, while I was getting my degree, I was sitting in on all the classes in the business school.
So what are you working on now, and what kind of is your focus business-wise, and what you teach at the moment?
Yeah, the book that you and I are co-authoring together with others is the next thing that's launching, and then our telepathy, remote viewing, animal communication program will be next after that, which will be the third or fourth time we've run it. And this was a podcast guest of friend of mine and a co-author in a previous one of those Activate books. And she was on my show, and she said she's an animal communicator from Denmark, and she's like, I can teach you telepathy in 5 minutes. I was like, fine, prove it. And so we actually, after the interview, we hopped on her Instagram live, and she brought 3 pictures of horses, and on her desk beside her was their medical history. So these were horses that she had worked with before. She's like, I have the medical history here, and I'm going to quiz you on this medical history. I want you to connect with the horse and tell me what it feels, what's going on with the body, what's going on with its personality. And then I have this, and we can reveal how accurate you were. And I was like 90% accurate on my first try. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're a genius. Do you want to teach this with me? And she's like, yeah. And one of the crazy things was, as I started to prepare to teach it for the first time, telepathy and animal communication, I said, I think maybe if we get enough students, we could do some sort of scientific research around this. Maybe we could even sort of prove the existence of telepathy, which is an interesting idea. It turns out it was proven 75 years ago, and there's more than 10,000 papers supporting telepathy and remote viewing. And I just had never done the reading. So it's quite well established scientifically, and a lot of interesting studies that show different aspects of telepathy and non-local consciousness. So I'm still looking for exactly like where we can add to the scientific knowledge, because that would be fun to come up with a good experiment. We have all these students now. We've had she's had over 450 total students that she's taught telepathy to. So we have this great pool of qualified subjects, I suppose.
So, okay, so I'm trying to figure out where we go with this. Let's go back, because adventure, like you said, is a massive, and I want to get onto kind of the time bending and all the amazing stuff I know you teach, because I really want to go into that. But adventure is kind of the theme that outlined a lot of your life. For me, adventure is such a like an exciting thing to talk about. Growing up with arthritis and being disabled for much of my life, I didn't have any access to adventure. I became wheelchair bound when I was 18. So when all my friends were going to university and going traveling, that was when I was at the peak of the illness. So I felt like I never got to do adventure, and I'm starting to get to that now. But having kind of gone straight from like going into a state of wellness to having kids, it took out a big chunk of like the time that I should have started doing all of that. So I'm so fascinated by things that I haven't yet done. And I think anything's possible. Like I'm, living my life and building this life towards things that I want to do. But I am fascinated by people who have lived a life of adventure. So I'd love to hear from you about like where you went with that, what adventure was for you, because I know that it ties in very much with kind of all your metaphysical studies and where we're going to take this chat next.
Yeah, adventure to me for a long time was both on the physical sports exploration side and also the travel side, and then combining them, doing like we set a world record for volcano climbing in Bali. We just there's three summits, 3 peaks in consecutive order, and there's a race to climb all 3 of them in a day. And that was one of my early magical metaphysical experiences occurred during our record attempt, or a successful, we set the record. So growing up, I was in the Boy Scouts, and I always say like I was never rebellious as a kid towards my parents, because I was already jumping off cliffs and building huge bonfires and building catapults and just all the crazy stuff that you could get into as a teenager in the woods. Sleeping out in an igloo as a kid. We did trips all over the country where we would go hike 100 miles in a couple of weeks. And there was a time when we were hiking in New Mexico, and this story just popped into my head, but we stumbled across this old Indian woman who was like rebuilding her cabin, and we stopped for the day and just like built her cabin for her, and she gave us all
Love
little
that.
like magical objects, and we got to learn, like how do you like lift a huge log to make a wall of a log cabin, and so that's that's one of the beautiful things of adventure, of travel, is that you can really just create circumstances to have new experiences. You have to just kind of like pick yourself up and place yourself in a new country, new experience, new way of thinking, whatever it is, and then you're off to the races.
So what was the most profound adventure experience for you?
I'm not sure why, but I had a girlfriend in college, and I had just come back from studying abroad in Australia. I studied on the Great Barrier Reef. Can't do that in the center of the continent, so I had to go to the location, and that was part of the reason I wanted to be a biologist, was to actually get in the field and all that. But when I came back, my girlfriend, we were supposed to live together for the first time, and she had already moved into this house, but she was like, I just can't do it. She was a wilderness guide at a camp, and she's like, I have to go do it one more year. So she left the day before I came back. And I was like, no, here I am expecting to move in with my girlfriend, and she leaves for the summer, and I don't have a car. And I end up hitchhiking across 3 states basically to go visit her. And I still hitchhike to this day, because now I know like how amazing it can be, but everyone was like, are you crazy? Like, no one hitchhikes anymore. What do you'll probably get killed, etc. And it was like, I know, but I have to go see my girlfriend, and there's no bus that goes there, so I have to hitchhike. Like that's the option. I'm sure there was other options, like I could have rented a car or something. Probably no, I wasn't old enough to rent a car. That's why. So yeah, just you find a solution to your problem, and then you give it a whirl, and people show up to support you. The universe shows up to support you.
So when did kind of your journey with spirituality happen? Was it always there, or did it happen within that? Because I think it happened for you kind of within that journey of adventure, right? Like,
right,
where did
exactly.
the two intertwine?
Yeah, and I was trained as a materialist in the sciences. We, probably still the prevailing, the older generation of scientists thinks reality is created in the brain. And that we just, are kind of these biological robots, and we create the reality we perceive. And so that was my presumption. And so that kind of like throws out a lot of spirituality. But I was experiencing a lot of magical things on my travels, surreal, non-ordinary reality, just things that blew my mind over and over again. And I was like, the first place I went, honestly, was, what's the scientific underpinning of how this is happening? Like, how am I able to use telepathy with a tree? That was one of my early experiences. Or how exactly did the Balinese shamans turn on the rain? How did they successfully like make it rainy season instantly? And just a lot more experiences. And then so I was like, wow, if this is happening, then there must be a fundamental mechanism that allows it to work. So what is it? And of course there is. Like, nothing can happen. I mean, if it happens, then there's a way for it to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I
this is
say
where actually we learn, right, that they're like, people think it's either or, people think it's science or it's spirituality, and actually it's also intertwined.
Yeah, a lot of like the higher dimensional entities that would say like there is no spirituality at higher levels. Like, it's all just science. because that's just the way that the universe works, you know.
I feel like I interrupted you there and you lost your train of thought.
I just want to make sure I stop my train every now and then, so you have time to.
Oh, no. I like your train. I like it. Do you think that was guided by Don Javier? Because everyone I speak to that's on the shamanic apprenticeship that we're on has had these kind of metaphysical experiences, you know, throughout their lives, and they're like, wow, that was a magical thing that I don't feel like is happening to other people. Where did that come from? And like for me, I think it was I grew up with spirituality. My mum was, you know, a spiritualist, and my grandparents, so it never felt so I guess out there to me. I wasn't trying to explain it because it was already, I guess, normal for me. But there were still these things that happened, and I now think that was guided by perhaps like DX guiding us towards where we were meant to be to find that.
I do believe that he has the power to be able to orchestrate events like that. And you know, because I've seen miracles happen. But I think this was actually just my own higher self orchestrating the events unfolding. He probably was aware that I would eventually connect with him. But I think that was probably my own agreements that I had set up for my life trajectory.
Yeah, that too. I just have some I have situations like that, but I have situations where I'm very aware that it was kind of orchestrated by him. There have been a lot of things that have been orchestrated by him, and I don't go into kind of too much detail of that on the podcast or generally in public, you know. There are some, and I'm sure you're the same with your work with him, because people ask me a lot of questions, and I'm very public with pretty much everything. And that's one thing that I don't go into too much detail. I've never been into too much detail on, but I do like to touch on it because I think it's really interesting, and I get a lot of questions about it. And I think it's interesting to touch on kind of like, how did it happen? Because a lot of people come to these, you know, what I guess people want to call spiritual awakening, and it does almost feel like orchestrated. It does feel like it's happening because something is bringing it all into place at a specific time for a specific reason, which I find really fascinating. But I want to go into the metaphysical stuff you do because it's really deep, and we're not getting into it. Let's talk about kind of the work you've done within, you know, metaphysics, and I just, it's so broad, but I want to kind of just hand over to you and let you open that up.
Well, you mentioned I just finished this quest, which I didn't really know it was a quest until halfway through. And it was actually, I was trying to think of like a fun little hook for telling people about what I was up to. And I was like, I've experimented with X number of different techniques. And this was me visiting priests and shamans and holy men around the world, traveling or going to sacred sites. And then once I started digging into the science, I was like seeking out practitioners of different types, you know, crystal healers or Reiki practitioners or breathwork people, you know, people that had sort of innovated their own techniques. And now I have this wonderful book series of people who are, you know, teaching and guiding various healing, coaching practices, which is wonderful. It's like puts me in contact with all different concepts and ideas in metaphysics. So once I had about halfway there, about 50, I was like, well, this should be a quest. I should do 100. I should really explore everything from dreams to, you know, trauma release, whatnot, to astral travel, and just really understand like what we are capable of as humans here on Earth. And in that exploration, you know, that's why I got in touch with the shaman in the first place, because he, you know, at that point it was like, why not? It's part of my quest. And there are some of those aspects like the dream work, like breath work and various meditation techniques that have become part of my schedule, my regular routine, and other things where I just tried it one or a few times and I was like, that's really interesting. That's all it was. And some stuff I found to be really effective. Like the emotion code, for example, was astounding to see it work. And others, like the first time I had crystal therapy, it was interesting and kind of buzzy, but didn't change my life really, like I hoped it would. But it is very subtle. So actually, yeah, I might as well just share the emotion code story. We last year about this time we were traveling to California to stay with my sister-in-law, and they have two big dogs, and my son had this terrible fear of dogs, like 10 out of 10. And he couldn't be within 100 feet of a dog without just a panic attack, basically. And I posted something like, hey, who can help with this? We'd like to figure out a way forward. And my friend Gina, she said, well, I think emotion code can help you with that. And in one session remotely, she was in Hawaii, we're in St. Louis. In one session, she discovered 34, 37 different charges that had built up between my son and his relationship with dogs. So a charged wall around his heart in between him and dogs. And she was able to clear all of them. And his fear of dogs immediately went from a 10 out of 10 to a 1, like
wow,
totally neutral. And it was just crazy because the next time a dog just walked past him, he didn't even really notice it. and it just blew me away how effective that could be. And also remotely, right? It was nice confirmation for me, like this stuff works independent of space and time, largely.
so what was actually involved in the session?
Well, there's a process in the emotion code, which I believe involves muscle testing to figure out what the charge is about and where it came from. And then you can actually use magnets to decharge the stored emotion, because magnets are connected to emotions. And if you're in person, you can run a magnet down someone's spine. But if you're remote, I think you have to do it on a representation of the person. I'm not sure. I actually didn't really study the practice of it super in depth. But the interesting thing was that only 4 of those 34 charges were from his experience personally in this lifetime. The rest of the charges came from me, my wife, our epigenetic lineage, his past lifetimes, other people that he's encountered in his life. So he's picking up charges from all different kinds of places that weren't even really his, and were affecting this for him.
Wow. My mind is going around now thinking about how this can work for my son with his eating, his sensory food issues. So maybe
Yeah, you can do it for any fear, any like, yeah, you can also test, like, is there something available right now that I don't even know what it is that I could decharge? And you could theoretically do the whole process without knowing what you were releasing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's profound. Let's talk about time bending. I've heard you talk about kind of the scientific side of the metaphysics, I guess. And you do go really deep, and it's so interesting. So I'd love you to talk about time bending from that perspective.
Yeah, time is such an interesting one because personally, I've had the experience of wanting more time to get things done. And we know even from 3D physics that time is a construct. It's for Earth humans, we have this linear experience of time that demarcates one sort of memory unit or one experience unit after the other. So it's an effective tool for us to learn and grow. And that's kind of why it's in place. But from a higher perspective, it's all simultaneous, right? When you think of that book, The Power of Now, he's referring to you can only ever experience the present, and therefore time isn't a time stream. It's sort of a universal now that includes everything. What do I want to say here? So let's talk a bit about the your soul or your spirit, right? This infinite, immortal aspect of yourself that has all the experiences of all of your lifetimes put together, right? The seed of when you individuated from God or from the universe, and you have this soul that collects its own experiences from lifetimes. And the soul is growing and learning, and that's partly why the universe differentiates itself, is to experience itself in these infinite ways. And so you have a soul, which when you go into a body, now you have a body, and then the soul and the body come together and they form this unit. And then you have the body's experience of time as a physical thing with senses that can move through a world, but you also have the soul, which has its own experience of time and simultaneousness and a different type of growth and learning. And then when you put them together, you have kind of parallel coexisting experiences of time in a body. So you have both linear body time and infinite simultaneous soul time that anyone can access. And when you bend time, it's really about the perspective of which you are perceiving time. And you can do it either one. So you could, as a normal person, wake up, eat their breakfast, go to work out, get tired, go to bed, etc. It's a very linear, body experience. But if you are putting your attention internally, then you're more in control of the flow of time in a way. And there's the feeling that often enables people to have more control over time is first, when people want more time, they want different types of time. Sometimes they want to get everything completed on time. Like you got all the work done you wanted to by the end of the day, so you could spend time with your family. That's sort of one thing that people often want. And then there's the feeling of being in the right place at the right time, where good things just happen to you and it flows seamlessly and you're lucky. That's a different type of timing. And then there's just being on time. Like I have these appointments throughout my day, and I want to just make sure I arrive and I'm polite and I'm, make my meetings and pick up my kids when I need to. So there's different types of time experiences that people want. And so really discovering what the experience of time you want, and then focusing on living that experience and ignoring clock time in a way. So really something that people can do to try this at home, because it's actually quite simple to do if you can maintain your focus away from the construct of time. So most people are so bound, they're checking their watches and phones and stuff so regularly to make sure they're on schedule, especially a busy entrepreneur that has multiple meetings in a day. And they're really bound by that, the constraints of how we've all agreed that time is going to flow 24 hours, hour by hour kind of thing. So if you turn your attention away from that and just ignore that completely, but instead you focus on being perfectly on time for all of your meetings, then time will expand or contract to give you what you need. So the first time I tried this, I wanted to do a long workout, like a 2-hour workout, and I had 1 hour before dinner. I had to be home for dinner, and I wanted to do a long workout, and I still had to drive to the gym or travel there and back and shower and be ready for dinner. And I was like, well, let's try it. So I totally ignored the clock, did everything I wanted to do, a long warm up, stretching afterwards, etc. Um, and I got home, and it was like 5 minutes until dinner. I had time to set the table, and we all joined dinner at the same time, family dinner. And I was like, whoa, that was so seamless. And I was tempted. There was one moment when I was like, I should look at the clock. And I was like, nope, because that's going to pull me back into this other experience. And so that's the hardest part, is ignoring that urge to put yourself back into the collective time flow. So essentially you're removing yourself from the agreed upon time stream and just allowing time to expand or contract for you as it needs to.
Fun fact, humans take in more information in one day now than they did in their entire lives in the 1700s. No wonder we're overwhelmed. Our brains and bodies simply haven't evolved to manage this level of stress. And until that evolution happens, if we want to be well in mind and body, we need things that help alleviate this stress. For me, one of the key tools in my daily wellness toolkit that does this is the SENSATE. And if you've been here a while, you'll know how genuinely obsessed I am with this product. It is a piece of health tech that fits in the palm of your hand, and it basically sends infrasonic waves through the chest to activate the vagus nerve and calm the autonomic nervous system while you listen to the specially composed audio within the app. I usually use the SENSATE for 10 to 20 minutes before I sleep to reduce cortisol levels, calm my brainwave states from the hectic day, and send me into a deep sleep. Clients or friends of mine who have a SENSATE have told me that their sleep has never been so good. People who usually struggle with sleep just wake up in the same position they went to sleep in. Everyone needs a SENSATE, in my opinion, and I particularly recommend it to anyone who suffers from overwhelm or anxiety, and anyone who wants to deepen their meditation practice. And you can get £30 off the SENSATE by visiting getsensate.com and using code Lauren30. That's GETSENSATE.com, Lauren30. Thank you so much to SENSATE for supporting our mission here at Reconditioned.
For people who are listening to this, thinking about that from kind of the standard like human linear approach, and they're thinking, well, if I just work out or do what I want for however long, I'm going to be late. You can't get around that. It's really hard to explain, but it's more about the belief that you have. Like if you're thinking, well, I'm going to be late because I just don't have this time, but screw it, I won't look at the clock and see what happens. It's going to have a different outcome to if you actually have the belief that you have the ability to bend time. Would you say that's right? Or is that,
yeah.
I mean, I know there's more to it, but I'm trying to get into kind of the questions that I know people listening might have when they're thinking, but, you know, let's take single mums, for example. I know they have a lot of listeners that are single mums looking after their kids, working, and they feel very short of time. How would this work for them? And then also, can you then go back into the being in the right time at the right place thing? Because that's super interesting.
Yeah. And so the reason we have so many things that we experience in the world physically are because we have this collective agreement. Like you and I and everyone are creating the physical world by agreement in real time. So I like to think of it like a video game, that when your character is walking and it turns the corner, the thing that's around the corner like is created by the program in that moment. And it's the same for our physical reality. Like my door is closed and there's nothing behind it right now until I open the door and walk into the thing that's behind it. But I've walked through the door so many times that I have already a structure of what will be there when I walk through. And physics has essentially confirmed this through the double slit experiment, through last year's Nobel Prize winning award in physics, that the universe is not locally real, basically shows how physicality is arising from consciousness. It's basically a byproduct of consciousness. So consciousness is fundamental, belief is fundamental, and then the physical world arises from that.
A great book I read about that kind of gave me a bit of an understanding was Biocentrism. Have you ever read that one?
I'm not familiar.
No, Robert Lanza. Great book that really kind of helped me understand the like consciousness, perception, and what can arise as a result of perception. That really changed stuff for me. I also very much have the experience of, and I speak to clients about it a lot, though I have less of a scientific understanding than you do, much less of kind of the actual metaphysical process of it, but time expands when we do. I've experienced that because I can add more to my day. And I want to kind of preface the fact that I don't mean this in a, just keep adding things to your schedule. It doesn't matter how busy you are. It's not like a go against your, instincts and mess up your nervous system by adding loads to your time that you can't do. But it's more of a, I didn't think I had time to open a business, right? I was already doing the podcast and was already kind of basically like coaching people and writing blogs. And I was like, I don't have time to actually be a coach, like officially. And somehow I made time for that and had another kid. And like, I don't know, like everything time when I feel like I can. So at the moment, my husband and I literally this week are in this debate about, I am desperate to get a dog because our last dog passed a few years ago, and I am such a dog person and I don't like the house without a dog. I'm so ready. The kids were really little, so it was, we had to wait till a certain time. And I'm at that point where I know right now is the time for a dog. Have I got heaps of quote unquote time? No, I run a very busy business, which has multiple layers to it, the podcast, the writing, the clients, the courses. I have 2 kids. I do most of the school runs on my own to a school that, is quite far from us. Technically, I don't have time, but I said to my husband, I know that I feel that now's the right time and I will be able to manage it regardless. And he's like, no, we just can't. There's not enough time as it is. We can't, we're struggling to fit everything in. And I'm like, my perception of that is different. I don't feel like I'm struggling to fit everything in. But his perception is that we are. So it's really interesting because he's like, no, we're not getting a dog. And we're literally in a debate because I found a dog that I want. I'm like, please let me confirm. And he's like, no. He's like, no, just no, we're not. So right now we're literally in this debate about it because I feel like I am at that point. And and I think your higher self tells you when the time is right, because we were in this situation about just over a year ago and we nearly got a dog, and I was the one that pulled out and I was like, can't do it right now. I don't think in that state I was in a position to expand myself and therefore expand time from that place. But now I know I can, therefore I can. Right, the biology of belief.
Yeah, and I noticed there's 2 distinct ways that you and your husband are approaching this, right? He's got a list of reasons that he's thought through, and you just know.
Which is always the masculine and feminine, right? And that's kind of, and he feels he has to balance that because although I do think I have a good balance of that generally, like in business and stuff. I'm not always just off on the feminine flow. Like I have a balance of it, but I guess in our relationship, he feels like he has to balance that because he feels he won't cope if we get a dog and it's too much. But I said to him, look at the people who do have 2, 3, 4 kids and they have a dog and they work. And the people that I look at that, quote unquote, cope with all of that are the people whose perceptions are different to ours. So the people who will say, oh yeah, it's great, we love it, yeah, it's a bit of chaos, but it's all fun and games. And I know people who literally talk like that. And because they talk like that, they make that their reality. And this is a lot of what I do in my work. And I speak to clients about identity. Your identity is everything. You operate from the identity of the sick person, you're going to be the sick person. You operate from the identity of the broke person, you're creating that reality. You operate from the identity of the wealthy person or the person who has heaps of time and can manage stuff and copes, you will. But when you're constantly saying out loud, we're the kind of people who can't cope, we're the kind of people who just don't have time, we're the kind of people who are so busy, you make that a reality. So right now, yeah, I'm working on him.
Well, I think you can be fully in your masculine as a man and listen to the guidance that you're getting.
That would be the divine masculine, yeah.
Because people that are really busy are doing things by force. They think, oh, I got to do this in my business, or I got to set things up properly. I have to have this schedule so that I can achieve everything. But if you're waiting and listening, and like your example of, I know it's not the right time to get a dog. If you only do things precisely at the right moment to do them, then you save so much time fighting uphill doing things when you could have just waited for the perfect time. So perfect timing or lucky timing involves tuning into your perception, like what is your higher self telling you, and how does it feel in your body if you're facing a decision like getting a dog or starting a business or moving or anything. If you can listen well enough, you'll know when the time is, and then you can act quickly and it will just be seamless.
I have so many experiences like that. I actually did an episode about this exactly with Jen Finley, who you know as well. And, you know, because she teaches a lot about intuition. And I always give the example of when we were looking for a new house, and we found this house that on paper was perfect. It was better than perfect. It was more than we thought we could get. It was huge. It had this massive big garden that overlooked fields. And Daniel was like, we're going to put an offer in on this house. And he was calling the agent. And I went, put the phone down. This isn't our house. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, I don't know. I can't tell you really what I mean. And I don't know why. I'm just telling you this isn't our house. And I really liked this house. I was walking around going, oh, this is a great writing space. And oh my goodness, three floors. And this bedroom is amazing. And look at this garden. And it wasn't our house. And he trusted me because he knows how much I trust my intuition. And it was the right move. And we found our house and you know, whatever, a different story. But I guess in the dog thing, he's not trusting me. But a question I want to ask you here is, what would be your tips for people who are saying, how can I trust my intuition more? Like, how can I know when my intuition is telling me something is right or isn't right?
Yeah. One of the ways is to, one of the ways we do it in our class, for example, is to train it in a way so that you trust it. So do it with things you know to be true, and then test yourself. We play this game with my kids where we like put something in the cupboard and we ask them what's in the cupboard, and they remote view into the cupboard and see how close they are to the object. And a lot of times they don't get the object exactly right, but they might get, if I put a stuffed bear in there, they might be like, it's kind of fuzzy, or maybe it's an animal, or I think it's one of my toys, or something like that. They'll get parts of the information. So that's one way, is to just scientifically back yourself up. When we teach people how to muscle test or train with the pendulum, right? It's like an algorithm. It's like a AI algorithm. You train it. So you give it 100 yes, no answers where you know the answer already. Then you realize, okay, it's doing the same thing every time with a yes, same thing every time with a no. Then you can feel confident to ask an unknown yes, no question. So there's different training methods where you just prove to yourself that the information you're getting, either the feeling inside or the perception in your your sense, whether that's like clairvoyance or clairaudience or however you receive information. So you just start to trust it. And that's something that when people go through our class or almost any extrasensory perception training, is that they start to trust themselves way more. But at first it's kind of weird, because you could say like, when is the right time for us to do this podcast? And we might set a time, and that's good for my schedule, that's good for your schedule, whatever. And then just how it happened, we're doing it today instead of the original scheduled date, because that wasn't the time to do it anyway. So perhaps we could have just tuned in, like, when are we going to do this podcast? Oh, 11:11, perfect. And here
Oh my
we
God,
go.
it
We
is
could have just
11:11, isn't it?
yeah. So you
You know,
can
I never thought of that. That's crazy. It's all the ones, which, yeah.
11:11, and someone just told me, like, if you add up all the numbers, 11:11, 11, 2023, that all adds up to 11, 111, 2, 0, 2, 3. And so I'm not that trained in numerology, but it's significant that the whole date is 11 as well.
So significant because the whole numerology thing only came to me. I never got the angel numbers thing. I never understood it. I never believed in it. I was like, it's numbers, like it's a human thing. It's not, until I started working with DX. So it's interesting that the episode that you and I are doing is all about that. And what came to me then was the ones and the twos. And when I see ones together, it means something for me. And when I see twos together, it means something for me. Like 22, or when I see 11, they mean different things for me. And that only clicked for me when I started working with DX. So it's really interesting that this is happening with the episode that you and I are doing. So
Yeah.
I didn't even clock that it was that. So thank you for bringing that up. The next thing I want to talk to you about is something that I'm super interested in, and I know you're really passionate about at the moment, which is being a creator and what that means. Like, take me through your passion with that, and what being a creator and how we can be creators and how we can be the best possible creators, and what that actually means for our growth.
Yeah. I maybe it's the way that you phrase it. Like, I don't often put that identity on myself. Like, I'm a creator, but it's something that I've in my interest around the legal system and money and the magic words that these systems use. I actually got there. It's so interesting. I got to studying law recently over the last couple of years. First, I wanted to study how sound impacts the material world, and then I was like, maybe I should research magic words, the history of actual magic words. And I realized through that study that the legal system is built on magic words. And then I was like, wait a second. And so I started digging into how the legal and monetary system is built to be a multidimensional control mechanism to basically channel life force in from one person, one creator, into another without their awareness of it, essentially. And as I got through the layers, I realized, like, so basically money, even if you study like modern money mechanics, like there's a Federal Reserve brief that tells how money works, and it's basically money. The money supply expands when a living person takes out a loan or a mortgage or anything. Like, we are creating money and abundance out of thin air, like when we say it's time. And that's really been a spiritual journey for me to realize, like, oh shit, I can just make money whenever I need it. And it creates money for everyone. And that it's just been teaching me through this experience about, how, because money is such a interesting part of our Earth human experience. Like, it didn't have to exactly work the way that it did. I'm sure there's other planets, other extraterrestrial civilizations that either don't use money at all or use money totally differently. But we've had this same system for thousands of years, essentially, this sort of debt matrix system. And so just sort of really perceiving that I can operate in or out of the system depending on where I'm placing my attention has been eye-opening for me.
Can you go into that more? Because I know that money is such a big topic for people. And I know whenever I speak about this, people are like, okay, explain more, please. I want to know. How do I do it? Take us more into what you mean by that, and how people can kind of action these understandings, these knowings about money and energy?
Yeah. So money is created. Let's say you want to get a mortgage for a house, and the house is $1 million, for example. So you give them a promissory note, like I will pay you $1 million back. And that note can be traded for cash. So you've given them $1 million of cash, and they give you the house in return. So that's an even swap. You created that out of, you signed the paper and it's worth $1 million, and you give it to them and they give you the house. And at that point, it's an even trade because you've given them $1 million of value and they've given you $1 million of value. Now, where they get into extracting the life force is that they get you to keep paying them on that note. So you give them $1 million of value upfront. They take that million and they do 10 $1 million loans. So they turn that, because of fractional reserve lending, they loan it out to 10 people. So you've now just created $10 million. And then all those people are paying back the bank, which never had any money until you gave it to them and to begin with. So you've created $10 million, and then they're expecting you to keep paying them monthly for 30 years on it. It's kind of crazy to think about. So that's the unfairness of the system, is that people keep paying on when they're the ones who created the money up front for the whole thing in the first place.
But like what from a perspective, if you say, I am using my credit card, which is nearly maxed out, and I shouldn't go and buy such and such, but actually I have an event and I need to, I know, like buy a dress and a pair of shoes, but I'm going to max out my credit card. That's it. It's maxed out. No, there's no kind of any other way of looking at it other than that will be maxed out and I will have to pay it back, and I would have got myself in trouble.
Yeah. And here's where we get into, like if it were just you and me making a deal and you wanted to sell me something or do a service for me, then you're worth your work, right? So we would get into an agreement where I would pay you a certain amount of value for what you're delivering to me. In countries like yours and mine, where there is a central bank, there's all kinds of other agreements that already exist around the banking and financial system. And in the United States in particular, the government is the one responsible for all the debt, because in the Depression, the country went bankrupt. And in order to get working capital from the central bank, and there's a central bank in most countries, and this agreement is similar in most countries, but in the United States, to get money to keep the government going, they had to put up collateral. And the collateral was all the land and all the labor of all the citizens. And so in return, basically we have unlimited credit. So we've put up, not really with our knowing, but that's the laws that are in place, that we've agreed to be the collateral. And the government has agreed to be the one responsible for all the debt. So we create the money and the government is in charge of discharging or paying off the debt that's created.
How do we get around that in terms of creating more wealth for ourselves?
Yeah, and it's a matter of awareness of what identity you have. Again, back to what you focus on, what role you're playing, what hat you're wearing. So in the United States, the way they set this up was they have people, essentially they give them a public entity which has the same name as them. It's a trust basically that has your name. So there's a Derek Loudermilk trust. It's linked to the birth certificate and the social security number, and that's the collateral. And until you claim executorship of that trust estate, it's administered by the government, because you're in a minor status essentially. So you're essentially a ward of the state until you let them know otherwise. And then because you're a living person, you're not this trust. You need to administer it as you would a trust estate. So you need to know when you're the trustee or when you're the beneficiary, when you're the executor of this legal entity. So you need to learn a little bit about trust law and contract law and finance law and things like that.
So that's how you get around it? Create more wealth? Like from a metaphysical perspective in terms of wealth creation? Because I know you talk about that as well.
So if you want like 3D wealth, if you want to like translate your feeling of wealth into cash or houses or something like that, that's a game, right? You got to squeeze your infinite nature as a creator into this little ever-changing financial structure that exists here on the planet. So you really have to think of it like a game of Monopoly. What are the rules that we're using today? Once you know the rules, then you move your game piece around accordingly. So I often, when I get a piece of mail addressed to this legal trust entity, I think of it as my Monopoly piece. I'm like, okay, they're like, dear Mr. Tin Hat, here's our legal communication to you. Okay, great. I'm responding for my game piece. Here's my response, but it's so funny, right? Because we're playing this game of finance Monopoly as incarnated beings, which is also kind of a game from our higher self. So our higher self is, so like our human body is the game piece for our higher self, and our fictional financial entity is the game piece for our human self. So it's like a layered game of, perception, essentially.
This is all the legal fiction stuff that you've been talking about. It's so interesting. Exactly. I wonder, before we wrap up, what your thoughts are on how AI is going now.
I haven't thought too much about it. I'm not super worried about it. I see a lot more potential for it. For example, if we're successful and we remove the financial power from the military industrial banking complex, and we make that abundance or wealth money available just to people to use, probably the most efficient way to administer that is with an AI program. So if someone is like, I need a house and healthcare and transportation for my family, then the AI system could be like, yeah, here's all the resources you need, because we are aware of the whole pool of resources and how to administer it. And I just see like people getting their needs met in a much more seamless way, facilitated by AI. And that's like systems and support structures and services that people need, I think could be administered quite well from there. I think the danger, and we've seen this, or the intel on this from higher dimensional sources, so from channeled sources, is that there's an AI threat from another universe, which has essentially bled into our universe, and it's an anti-life threat. So that has filtered into sort of the transhumanist agenda, the things that basically alienate people from their own biology or connectedness, or even I believe some of the pollution that we see on the planet is probably infiltrated by an influence, like an anti-life, anti-human agenda from this sort of external AI source. So I think, but the AI that we're developing here will be more aligned because we're, starting to become aware of who we are as living creator beings, and that we just need to sort of be aware of like what type of AI and how it's programmed and where it's coming from. And again, that's what we talked about before. When you train your sense, your ability to perceive, that's going to help us navigate the whole thing.
See, I believe in that, but I have little faith in governments and powers that be to use AI for the benefit of the masses as opposed to the 1%.
The thing is that people who want to control the 1%, they've used whatever mechanism is available to them throughout history. But their time is pretty much over. And that's because of the rising awareness of the collective. And the way that I see it is that type of control, power structures will just dissolve, because it'll maybe continue to exist, but in a way that it won't be here on our planet anymore. As if we raise ourselves collectively, where we're focusing on being of service and love and joy and those things, it'll just sort of shatter that structure, like when you sing into a wine glass, the pitch, the frequency will be inharmonious with the structures that exist of control. And I think the experience will be that it'll just sort of drift away, and we'll wonder, like, why do we do things so backwards anyway? When now it makes so much more sense to do things with love for each other. So I don't know. I think for sure, maybe for the next 5, 10, 20 years even, we'll see the shattering take place. But I think, even by 2030, the world's going to be totally different.
Yeah, for sure. I love what you've just said, because it, with everything that's been going on with Israel, it's been a very hard time for me with all my family being there. And after the first 5 days of being completely broken, after that I came back. I've spoken about this on my episode that I did with Aaron Abke, but came back to my center and had this deep knowing that only love can overcome this. And so the more of us who wake up to that, and the more of us who are in that place, it definitely does something, which is why this collective awakening that is happening. And yes, it's perception, right? You can be on social media and you can be looking at all the violent things that are happening, or you can be on social media or around people acknowledging all the people who are kind of waking up to truth, capital T truth. So it's all perception as well. And when we kind of put our perception in that state, we can go, yeah, but I also see that so many people are waking up to this, and so many people are sharing love. And that's what I'm seeing. So if I'm seeing that, then I can create more of that.
Yeah, it reminds me of, there was, I believe it was during the Cuban Missile Crisis, where Russia had put nukes in Cuba. And it was like, are we going to launch nukes at each other? And there was actually, in one location, the order was given, and a general didn't launch. He was like, I'm not going to do that. That's dumb. And it was one person deciding, like, no, I think we should just work it out. So for, any war, like, each individual has to opt out of it. Like if the generals, if Putin is like, attack, and everyone's like, no, that's dumb, then he's got nothing to stand on, right?
Yeah.
So it comes down, each individual just has to feel like, yeah, we don't need to do war. It's fine. We'll just play a game of chess instead, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's so hard to do that. But again, perception, again, when you're in that place of believing that it's hard to do that, but we can also believe that we can just play a game of chess, or we can just laugh with our kids and, whatever it might be. And yeah, I think the theme of this this episode is really perception, isn't it? Okay,
Yeah.
so all about you, rapid fire round, which
Oh,
I love. We always start with the first one is the same for everyone. So wellness is.
wellness is amazing because we've had so much sickness in the last 6, 7 weeks in my house. Someone's been sick for 7 weeks, and it's like when it clears up and it's like a breath of fresh air, it feels so amazing. So it's nice to have that experience of coming out of the fog for me right now. Like today, basically, is the first time I've been well in weeks.
So just for you and everyone listening, like that's my experience of life, because having come from not had use of my joints for most of my life, I actually spent every day feeling like that. Even if I'm sick, like with an illness, which I have been the last week, as you know, which is why we rescheduled. So even when I've got a cold, and I say this just to kind of, inspire people into feeling gratitude, or, even if I've got the flu, or even if I'm really, really ill with something, I'm like, oh, but like I have use of my joints, I can walk. Or even when my joints didn't work, I remember coming back to, okay, but my blood works, my organs mainly work, even my liver didn't, because of medication I took. And I remember that was like the initiation of my healing, having that gratitude. And so this week it's been, oh, how lucky am I? I've got a cold, but like I'm in my warm bed in my cozy house, and my window in my bedroom looks out to all the trees, and it's so beautiful. And I'm just sitting here under my duvet, and my kids are safe at school, and this is so cool. I've got my hot water bottle, and I'm an entrepreneur, so I can work from bed, which is even cooler. I'm sitting here with a cup of tea. So like that's my whole experience of, my mum always laughs at me. I always walk upstairs when there's an escalator. I went out with my parents a few weeks ago, about just over a month ago. And we were in King's Cross station, which is one of the biggest stations, like train stations in London. It's like an international train station. And there's a lot of stairs and two like big escalators to get up when you come out the train. And my dad was like, Lauren, why? And my dad's nearly 80, and he's like, why are you using the stairs? And I was like, because I can. So I always do, and how cool is that? And yeah, I did. Anyway, sorry, I've completely overtaken your all about me with wellness is. But yeah, I like to focus on that and to remind people that wellness is amazing. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
One thing you absolutely know to be true that others don't agree with.
I think people are coming around, but the thing that I said about consciousness being fundamental, I think just from studying it, I have a perspective of how and why that's true, and it's something I love to when people really want to know like how dimensions work and how consciousness, makes us move and walk around. It's really cool, and I even see the scientific community coming around and realizing like, oh wow, we tried to isolate this experiment, but it's impossible to isolate something because everything is connected. So what does that mean for everything we've ever done in science? So I think that's something that I sort of realized maybe just a step before others, but there's this huge wave of people just also getting that now.
Yeah, I definitely see that. If you had to explain to people in one short sentence the most surefire way to become successful, what would it be?
It has something to do with grit, something to do with never giving up. All the things that I've been successful, there was also just like an inner fire that I tapped. So it's, to be a pro cyclist isn't necessarily a well-paying career. I was just like, I just need to try to be a pro cyclist. And I dedicated, many years to training and figuring out how to make that happen. And it was just seamless, I was just on to the next thing. Okay, I need to move abroad. I need to move to Colorado. I need to hire a coach, whatever I need to do. I need to do these races in order to get noticed. The sequence unfolded, but it was like, yeah, I can be a pro cyclist and I'll just keep going until I am. And yeah, whether you want to call that inner belief or just allowing your guidance system to guide you and just doing the things you need to do, it seems pretty straightforward when you do it that way.
Yeah, I agree. I've had that experience with pretty much everything that I've stuck with, from my healing journey to business to my writing, and things that I know, like things that I see in my future that I'm like, and I don't mean that even from a clairvoyant, not even clairvoyant, but like I've seen the future perspective, just something I feel this is going to happen to me, for me.
Mhm.
And it's just sticking with it. I'm just making it, just sticking with it until it goddamn happens,
Yeah, I will say that when my first, I was a speed skater from a young age, was on the junior Olympic national team for a while, and then I was a runner in high school and college, and then I was a cyclist. And seeing it took 7 years of speed skating, it took 7 years of running for me to really hit my potential. So now I think of like, oh, you've been in business 7 years, you're like probably starting to get really good. And just sort of seeing, yeah, I had to run 20,000 miles before I was actually fast. And that sort of longer term perspective of like what like real high quality world class effort looks like, I realize, okay, I'm in the first year of this. Here's what I'm going to be experiencing. I'm going to get good really fast, and I'm still a beginner. I'm still a baby, and I won't even have the perspective to know exactly what world class is until I've been in the game for a few years.
That's such a good point, isn't it? Yeah. I say that to people a lot on healing journeys, because I do believe it can take people a lot quicker than it took me, which was 10 years from the point that I deciding, okay, I'm going to heal, to the point of getting to a place of complete wellness it was nearly 11 years. I don't believe it needs to take everyone that long, but for me there was no internet, there was no way of connecting with, like, how am I going to find all these answers, which we do have now, but it's still not going to happen overnight. And it's having that perseverance, and also the belief, the faith that the journey to that place is part of it, which you only see afterwards. But if you can accept it when it's happening, like the difficulties, the challenges, that's freedom.
Yeah, there's a point of view that the scientific research around luck corroborates, that if you view everything, challenges and opportunities, as miracles unfolding exactly how they're supposed to, then you will be way more lucky. And so that's been a really fun perspective shift for me, is to like, when it's really hard, be like, wow, look at this miracle setting things up for me perfectly.
I love that. Yeah. Okay, last one. What's the most profound lesson you've learned on your shamanic apprenticeship?
That there's nothing that's not possible. And
Yeah.
when I've seen impossible things or experienced them, when you get your mind blown enough, then you're like, well, nothing is going to surprise me. Nothing is going to blow me away. I mean, sure, something will. But it's like, I'm willing to believe anything at this point if I'm shown that.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. Derek, where can people find you if they want to work with you, learn more about you, listen to you, watch you?
Yeah. Derek Loudermilk, basically everywhere. DerekLoudermilk.com, on YouTube, Derek Loudermilk Show podcast, Derek Loudermilk on socials. Yeah, it's pretty much
Pretty
the same.
simple. Well, I will link it all in the show notes as well. But yeah, pretty simple to understand. Thank you so much for giving me your time, for being generous on your time, and for joining me on 1111.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Good to be with you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Reconditioned. I am honestly so grateful to each and every person that tunes in. Thank you also for taking responsibility for your own well-being. You should know that just by choosing to listen to podcasts like this that further your well-being, you're moving more deeply into abundance consciousness. Now, don't forget, I have a bunch of free resources over at laurenvakneen.co.uk, as well as every recommendation you could ever need in regards to your well-being on the LV Recommends page, all categorized for your ease. Thank you also to our sponsors. These episodes would not be possible without them, so make sure to check them out and get some pretty awesome discounts on the show notes. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get updated each time a new one is released. Thank you. I appreciate you.